part one of this series, I introduced what I believe to be the ideal model of effectively introducing BDSM to any partner: action, emotion, and conversation. So if you haven't watched part one, I suggest you do so, because today we're taking that ACE model out into the world as I walk you through 8 scenes from the film 9.5 Weeks to show you how successful this strategy is and how you can prevent unintentional turnoffs. Alright, so today I wanted to present you with some tangible examples of how to execute this ACE model effectively. Because in the BDSM themed classic 9.5 Weeks, we have 6 different types of kink that were successfully introduced in this film: the initial power exchange dynamic, sensory play, daily rituals, food play, cross-dressing, and public play. But first, let's start with, how do you even tell a new partner you're kinky? I receive this question a lot from dom types who wish to share this side of their personality with their hopeful, submissive partner. And our dominant here, John, introduced this side of himself on his first date with tremendous success. He takes Elizabeth out to this fantastic, intimate place for lunch. And what do we see him do here? He's holding up her wine glass. He's giving her drinks and bites of food. That is an incredibly dominant move, especially on a first date. And notice, he didn't talk about it before he did it. He was just moving in that energy or action. Then he infuses tons of emotional connection into this time after the initial dominant action. He's telling her stories, he's making her laugh, and he even surprises her with a scarf that she wanted but she couldn't afford. And we see John continue to infuse this energy and emotional connection, this playfulness, as they go on to their second date. They go to the fair, and we see that John is buying her balloons, and that makes her feel very playful and even a bit little. And then he escalates the situation. He escalates the playfulness, and he actually leaves her on the Ferris wheel, which makes her more feisty and playful, but also at the same time little and vulnerable. So this is all emotion that he's building, all energy that he's building, and all of these are very subtle acts of dominant energy. Notice, not a lot of dialogue, if any, about his dominant desires. So the first date was an introduction to John's dominant side. Their second date is when John decided to introduce some sensory play. Now, he tried something on their first date. It did not work out so well. We'll talk about that later in this video. So here is their second date. And they've gone to the fair, and all of this playful, feisty energy and emotional connection has been created. And this allowed for a very natural transition later on in the evening of date number 2. When John and Elizabeth get home from their day together, the energy definitely begins to shift at John's command. And John actually opens with conversation, but it's very, very simple. He asks her one question: "Will you take off your dress?" Now, this is a very subtle act of dominance and one she could easily reject, but she doesn't. She willingly complies to his request, and that gives him data to work with and play off of. All right, so after that initial confirmation, John volleys another test in conversation. "May I blindfold you?" So this leads to a short conversation between our two characters where Elizabeth actually asks, "What if I don't want you to?" And John, sitting across the room, very calmly replies, "You could ask me to leave." Not only does she not ask him to leave, she confirms that she wants him to stay. So John uses this consent because it is. She just gave her verbal consent. What is consent? Consent is a completely mindful, willing, and uncoerced choice to say yes, and the ability to revoke that yes at any time without fear of repercussions. There was no fear of consequences. There was no fear of repercussions. Yeah, he might leave, but if she didn't want him there, then that would be a good thing, right? So there is no coercion. There is no manipulation. There is no fear of repercussions. He, in that moment, got her consent. And John uses this consent as permission to take action, and he blindfolds her. But what I want you to see is immediately after he does so, watch what he does. He holds her face and he comforts her with his touch. What is he doing in that moment? He's making sure the emotions and energy in this moment are positive and welcome. He does check-ins with her via conversation, again, at the start of the play. But the remainder of the scene is all action and emotion. Action and emotion. Action and emotion go hand in hand, and you will get further in action when you begin with emotion. Our dominant here also effortlessly established an erotic daily ritual in his budding dynamic. But again, the emphasis is on emotion and action. I know I sound like a broken record. I don't really care. Emotion and action, as we see in this next scene. John presents Elizabeth with a gift in a very dominant way. He sets it down and he makes her walk over to retrieve it, noting that he likes to watch her move. So instantly he's creating a very dominant energy, but also creating a positive emotion through compliments. She feels wanted, she feels desirable. That makes her feel happy and at ease and reassured, all right? So she comes over, she opens the gift, and it's a beautiful watch, which adds to her feelings of love and acceptance and connection. Only then does John present his ritual. And he asks her if she would look at the watch every day at a specific time and think of him touching her. Think of him being with her. And she very willingly agrees. And we see later on just how pleasantly distracting this ritual has become to her. All right, but he did it again through emotion and action, and then we infused the conversation. Now, throughout the movie, we see that John has a penchant for sensory play, and he introduces Elizabeth to this in a fun new way in the kitchen. We see John prepping all kinds of different foods while Elizabeth is presumably taking a shower. When she enters the kitchen, John does not open with conversation, but with action, immediately instructing her to stay put, close her eyes, and slide on the floor. The remainder of the scene is all a combination of emotion and action, as John uses a variety of foods to tease, play, and connect with Elizabeth in a way that is totally new to her experiences. Again, this is an introduction for her. This is a new thing. And he introduced it very successfully, and it was very pleasurable and fun and enjoyable and erotic and arousing to Elizabeth when he introduced it through dominant action and energy, through emotional connection, and then with bits of conversation. But notice, none of his strategies have been conversation-centric, as I discussed last week. You do not open with just loads of conversation. Why? Because your new partner, your vanilla partner, does not have an erotic or emotional reference point to the concepts you are trying to convey. So we give them that erotic and emotional reference point through subtly introducing action and energy as well as an emotional connection. And this strategy is so effective, in fact, that John was able to get Elizabeth to cross-dress in public. Yes, a vanilla cross-dressing in public. Let's talk about it. How did he get this done? So this actually happened as a result of Elizabeth's communication. She visits John one day at work and he takes her out to lunch and all the guys are around and she's just going, man, sometimes I wonder what it's like to be one of the guys. John is building arousal around the subject as he touches her lips and coaxes her to touch him sexually, but that's the extent of it as far as Elizabeth is concerned. Little does she know, John has plans as a result of her curiosity, and we see John leave Elizabeth a note in their hotel room to open the provided packages, get dressed, and meet him in the lobby. When Elizabeth shows up, she's wearing a suit, a fake mustache, and John has successfully gotten her, his new vanilla partner, to cross-dress in public. And you all think it can't be done. All right, but what I love so much about this scene is John is aware. He's so aware of how awkward this could be for Elizabeth. So he goes out of his way so often here to infuse playfulness, compliments, and other forms of emotional connection throughout their date. And we see the date end very successfully even after Elizabeth was mistaken for a man. So way to go there, John. Now John moves on to some public play, all right? So after having successfully navigated the public play space a little bit with that cross-dressing experiment, John decides to escalate things on their next date, a trip to the mall. They end up in the bedding department, and John instantly starts infusing this playful, silly, comfortable emotion by jumping on the bed, knocking over a vase accidentally. This makes Elizabeth laugh and feel at ease. So he continues to accomplish this energy, this very comfortable, playful energy, through a very humorous dialogue with the sales lady. And then he acts. All right, he hasn't had a conversation with Elizabeth. He hasn't, again, debriefed her, warned her, told her his plans, made sure that she consented to every little thing before he did it. No, he acts. He tells Elizabeth to sit on the bed, and he removes her shoes. He adds emotional connection to that moment by complimenting her feet in a very, very sweet way. So again, she relaxes. He sees that, and then he instructs her to lie on the bed and hold on to the headboard. The sales lady is right over there. And now Elizabeth is noticeably embarrassed, but equally aroused by the concept, and she complies. And we see John check in with her, and he asks if she's comfortable, again, adding to the emotional comfort here, the sense of safety and security. And then he jumps right back to action and says, "Spread your legs for daddy." Elizabeth is giggly and shy, but he keeps building the playful emotional energy between the two of them, and she complies very quickly. So the scene ends alluding to more playfulness and laughter as he climbs on top of her, and the sales lady probably goes to question her life choices. But that, again, is a beautiful example of action and emotion preceding conversation. Yes, there were check-ins, but there was not this major debrief where he was saying, okay, I want to take you to the mall, and I want to put you on this bed in front of the sales lady, and people might walk by, and then I'm going to have you take your shoes off. Like, he didn't ask her point by point if she consented to it, felt comfortable with it, or was aroused by it, because she probably would have said no. That is the power of infusing that emotional and erotic connection first. Give your partner that erotic reference point first. All right, so we now have practical examples that give us a pattern to follow. But there were actually about 3 scenes in this movie that hit my radar as big fail moments, okay? And we're gonna actually talk about 2 of them today. Not the third one. The third one involves a third party, and for our discussions today, that element of a third party adds a whole other level of variables that don't serve us for this particular discussion. So we're going to focus on the other two scenes in this film that I thought, ooh, John did not execute this well at all. And I want to talk about it because these two epic fails, in my opinion, could have very easily been avoided, all right? And I think John's first mistake was his impatience, all right? Good dominance, submissives, pay attention to this. Good dominance will be patient dominance. And John's first mistake was his impatience. So he and Elizabeth had just met that afternoon, and they spent the day together on a date. And he brings her to his friend's house. It looks to be on the water, so a pretty romantic setting. But he does two things wrong right off the bat. Number one, he tries to initiate sex through action without emotion. All right. And two, he tries to introduce elements of fear play as kind of a teasing fun thing, but he did so without reading the room or building any emotional safety first. So Elizabeth clearly becomes nervous with this man she just met, who's throwing out these lines about it's not like you could go and call a cab, we're all alone, things like that. And so she's getting a little awkward, a little nervous. And yes, he built great emotional connection during their date when they were out to lunch, etc. Now he wants to escalate it. He wants to escalate it to a sexual level here, and he makes it very clear through his actions. But that escalation requires equal emotional investment, which he overlooked due to his eagerness, due to his impatience. So that's why she asked to leave. Even though it was a successful date and she was having a wonderful time up until that point, that was her point where she got uncomfortable. She got a little scared. I don't feel reassured here. I don't know what's going on. I don't feel intrinsically safe. I want to go. I want this to end. And that's what he did. He honored that. And they ended the date. And although John was able to recover from his first date faux pas, his eagerness got the better of him a couple of other times in the film. And the scene that really impacted me the most was when he attempted to introduce degradation play, which I could have told you Elizabeth wasn't into, but that's beside the point. So John not only attempts degradation play, which you have to know your partner is really into that or really comfortable with trying it out. This is a vanilla he just really met. 9.5 weeks was the extent of their relationship. Sorry, spoilers. 9.5 weeks was the extent of their relationship. And we're like halfway through the film at this point. How long has he known her? And then he tries to introduce degradation play. It's not going to go over well, especially how he did it. Because how he did it was without using the ACE model, and he failed miserably. All right, here's what happened. Elizabeth is over at John's apartment, and the energy in the room is very stiff, very cold. Elizabeth is sitting across the room from John, obviously anxious, obviously a little tense. All right, you can see it. She's not super relaxed and comfortable. She can feel the energy in the room. She's anxious about it. And John instantly jumps to conversation without building any emotion. This is what not to do. This is why we do not open with conversation, because without emotion, he just goes, Elizabeth, we're going to play a little game. And for the next minute or so, John attempts to set this role play scene through conversation only. And Elizabeth very clearly has zero emotional arousal or erotic interest in this. And she even shakes her head in disbelief at this prospect, but through this conversation, she ends up trying to comply. So she slinks to her knees and begins picking up the money as John desires, but because there's no emotion or erotic interest, she gets in her head And she actually looks up and says, "Oh, this is stupid, John." But what does he do? He ignores her emotion. He's just plowing through. He totally ignores the emotion. So just keeps going and says, "Crawl." Clearly she's tense. Clearly she's anxious. Clearly she's not into this, and not even in a role play way. She's just not into this. She's displaced. She's disconnected. She's in her head. And at that point, because it's so uncomfortable for Elizabeth, she sets a boundary. And she says, "I don't want to crawl." But John is so fixated on accomplishing this scene, he disregards her emotions and begins to escalate the aggressive and cold energy in order to get her to sink into the role play. And it backfires big time. And why does it backfire? Because I have told you this. Whenever you elevate your kink above your partner, this is the door that you open. He's trying to escalate this because he's trying to push it through, push this role play scene through. It backfires on him. She genuinely starts to feel afraid, genuinely becomes triggered and emotional. That is never the reaction that you want from your submissive. Genuine fear. You want that nice, erotic, what are they gonna do? I don't know. You don't want genuine, "Please stop, I'm scared." And that's the difference we got here, all right? And that is a huge fail in my book. And it happened because of what I just said. John prioritized the kink over his partner. We discussed it last week. And John tried to accomplish the scene with communication only. Did you catch that? He totally disregarded Elizabeth's emotions. In all of the successful scenes, he was working with her emotions. In this scene, he disregards her emotions. In their first scene, in the first date scene, he disregards her emotions. In fact, the only reason this scene ended even remotely well, as in Elizabeth doesn't call the cops on him and file a restraining order, is John actually added emotion back into the mix. Watch. When he acknowledges that Elizabeth is genuinely triggered and fearful, he does three things, and he does them real quick. He stops his pursuit of the scene, he softens his energy toward Elizabeth, and he submits to Elizabeth's emotions by getting small and playful. Do you see it? Do you catch it? He's allowing her to feel bigger and safe again. Those are the only three reasons why he was able to salvage the damage that he did here. Is he had to soften beneath her. He had to make sure, I want her to feel powerful again, so I'm going to get beneath that. I'm going to soften. I'm going to stop my pursuit. I'm going to soften, and I'm going to submit. Again, because of a lack of emotion. Emotion is so powerful when it comes to seduction. And that, my friends, is just how powerful the ACE model is when used correctly to introduce BDSM to your new or newbie partner. When you focus on creating an emotional connection with your partner first and infuse subtle erotic acts, seducing kinky concepts can often be achieved quite effortlessly, as we saw here. Just remember to keep your priorities straight. Your partner first, your kinks second. And if you found this content helpful, hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. Click that notification bell so you'll never miss a post, and comment below with any questions you would like me to answer in an upcoming video.